He ran. Not because he wanted to, but because stopping meant listening. Branches whipped his face as he tore through the dark, boots slipping on wet leaves, lungs burning, heart slamming so hard it hurt his ears. Behind him, something laughed. Not loudly, not close, just close enough. "Don't," he gasped, voice breaking. "Don't do that." The laughter stopped. For half a second, the forest went completely silent. Then it spoke. "Evan?" The voice came from his left, his mother's voice, soft, confused, exactly the way she sounded when she called him in for dinner when he was a kid. He stumbled, nearly fell, and slapped a hand against a tree to steady himself. His chest heaved, his mouth filled with the taste of iron. "No," he whispered, "you're not real." The voice sighed, disappointed. "That hurts," it said. Evan bolted again, screaming as the woods closed in. And the memory shattered. "If you're listening right now, my dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these stories matter by subscribing. Thank you." 7 years later, Evan sat in his car with both hands locked around the steering wheel, knuckles white, knuckles shaking, the radio murmuring about another missing hiker found too late. He didn't hear the rest. He never did. His eyes were fixed on the tree line beyond the gas station parking lot, where the woods pressed close like they were listening. He hadn't planned on telling anyone, ever, but the anchor said the location out loud this time, and that was enough. The report called it an accident. Slippery terrain, poor visibility, hypothermia. The same words they always used. The kind of words that wrapped things up neatly and let people sleep at night. Evan turned the radio off. 7 years ago, Evan had promised he'd never talk about it again. Promised 4 other people. Promised himself. But promises didn't matter when the woods started taking people again. He drove for a long time before he pulled over. The engine ticked as it cooled. His hands were still shaking. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel and laughed once, sharp, hysterical. "You're doing it again," he muttered to himself. "You're letting it back in." The problem was, it had never left. Back then, the trip had started the way all bad decisions did, casual, half thought out, and fueled by boredom. Gabe had been the one to suggest it. He always was. "Just a weekend," Gabe had said, leaning against the counter in Evan's apartment, flipping a car key around his finger. "We camp Friday night, explore Saturday, head out Sunday morning. Simple." Christian had grinned immediately. "You mean photograph. That place is a gold mine." Terry had laughed from the couch. "As long as there's beer and a fire, I'm in." Matthew hadn't said much. He rarely did. He just nodded once, eyes flicking up from his phone. Quiet agreement. Evan hesitated, not because he didn't like camping, he did, but because something about the location sat wrong with him. Governor's Bridge, the woods near the old research refuge. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone pretended they didn't. "Come on," Gabe had said, clapping Evan on the shoulder. "You're the one who's always talking about getting away from the city." That was true, and Evan hated being the one who said no. So he agreed. Friday afternoon came fast. The drive out was loud, cramped, full of music and bad jokes. Windows down. The world felt normal, safe. The kind of normal that made you believe nothing bad could happen simply because you were young and together. They parked where the pavement ended and the dirt trail began. No signs, no barriers, just trees. Christian hopped out first, camera already in hand. "This light is perfect," he said, snapping photos of nothing in particular. Terry stretched and groaned. "Smells like dirt and regret." Evan laughed, shouldering his pack. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Matthew adjusted the straps on his bag, efficient, silent. Gabe checked the map one last time, even though they all knew it by heart. The woods swallowed them quickly. The trail narrowed, The air cooled. The sounds of the road faded until there was nothing left but footsteps and breath and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Evan felt it then. Not fear, not yet. Just awareness. The sense that the forest wasn't empty in the way cities were empty. This place felt occupied. They reached the clearing just before dusk. Gabe set up the tents while Terry gathered firewood, humming off-key. Christian wandered the perimeter, photographing trees, shadows, broken branches. Matthew helped where he was needed. No wasted motion, no complaints. Evan tried to ignore the tightness in his chest. The fire caught quickly. Flames licked upward, warm and familiar. Beer cans hissed open. Laughter filled the clearing. The woods pulled back a little, or at least it felt that way. "So," Terry said, poking the fire with a stick, "you guys know why my sister refused to come here with us?" Christian smirked. "Because she's smart?" Terry grinned. "Because of the Goatman." Evan froze. Gabe rolled his eyes. "You're really doing this." "Hey, I didn't make it up," Terry said. "Ask anyone local." Christian snorted. "Urban legend, teenagers, campfires, too much imagination." Terry leaned in anyway, eyes catching the firelight. "They say it looks like a man until it doesn't. Walks on two legs, carries something sharp, likes cars, likes people." "Likes people?" Evan asked before he could stop himself. "Especially people," Terry said cheerfully. "Calls their names, makes them come closer." Christian laughed. "You know how many variations of that story exist?" Matthew stared into the fire. "Enough," he said quietly. The word landed heavier than it should have. Gabe clapped his hands. "All right, that's enough nightmare fuel for one night." Terry raised his hands in surrender. "Just saying, don't wander off alone." They laughed it off. They always did. The night passed without incident. That should have been the warning. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Fog hung low between the trees, clinging to everything. Evan's clothes were damp when he crawled out of the tent. His breath fogged in front of him. Christian was already up, photographing the mist. "This place is unreal," he said, "like it's hiding something." "Everything hides something," Gabe replied, sipping coffee. "That's not special." They packed light and headed out toward the abandoned structures deeper in the refuge. The path was less clear here, nature reclaiming what had been left behind. Concrete buildings slumped under vines, rusted machinery sat half buried in the earth, windows shattered long ago. Christian was in heaven. "Look at this," he called, snapping photos of clawed-up walls. "These marks—" "Animals," Gabe said automatically. Evan crouched near the scratches. They were deep, too deep. Matthew straightened, head tilting. "You smell that?" They all did. Wet, musky, like fur left out in the rain. "Probably raccoons," Terry said, but his voice lacked conviction. They found the research station by accident, half hidden, less decayed, the door ajar. Evan's stomach twisted. "We should head back," he said. "Sun's dropping." Christian hesitated, then stepped inside anyway. Just a few shots. The air inside was wrong, thick, heavy. Bones littered the floor in deliberate patterns. Scratch marks gouged the concrete. Something had lived here. Something big. "Christian," Matthew said sharply. "Now!" They left as the light bled out of the sky. The walk back felt longer. The forest felt closer. By the time they reached camp, the smell had followed them. It circled the fire. And when the voices started calling their names, Evan knew, deep down, that running wouldn't save them this time. The first voice came from the trees to the east of the clearing. "Terry?" It sounded like a woman trying not to cry. Terry's head snapped up so fast his chair tipped backward. "Claire? His girlfriend's name left his mouth before his brain could stop it. He was already on his feet, staring into the dark. "Claire, is that you?" Evan's stomach dropped. That voice was perfect. The pitch, the hesitation, even the way it dragged Terry's name out like she always did when she was upset. "No," Evan said, standing abruptly. "That's not Terry," the voice called again. "I can't see. Where are you?" Christian laughed nervously. "Okay, that's a recording. Someone's messing with us." But his eyes kept darting to the trees. Gabe stood too, hand tightening around his flashlight. "Claire's 3 states away." The voice hesitated, just long enough to feel offended. "I drove," it said quietly. "I needed you." Terry took a step forward. Evan grabbed his arm hard. "Don't." Terry turned, eyes wide, confused. "Evan, that's her. I know her voice." "I know," Evan said. His own voice shook. "That's why you can't go." The forest shifted. Branches cracked under heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the clearing just beyond the light of the firelight. Whatever was out there didn't rush. It didn't stumble. It walked like it knew exactly where they were. Then another voice joined in. "Evan?" He froze. It was his mother. Not young, not old, just right, tired, familiar, the way she sounded when she was worried but trying not to show it. "I'm lost. I followed the wrong trail." Christian swore in his breath. No, that's not funny anymore." Gabe swung his flashlight towards the sound, beam cutting through trees, catching nothing but bark and shadow. "Whoever you are, knock it off." The light flicked out. Not died, not faded. It snapped off like someone had flipped a switch. Silence pressed in, thick, suffocating. Then Matthew spoke. "Do you hear that?" They all did. Another voice, softer, male. "Matt, please." Matthew went pale. "That's my dad," he whispered. "He's dead." The voice laughed. Not loud, not wild. A short, broken sound that didn't belong in any human throat. Evan's chest tightened until it hurt. His hands shook as he reached for the fire poker, gripping it like it might save him. "Stay by the fire," Gabe said, forcing calm into his voice. "No one leaves the light." The voices tested them. They rotated, never overlapping, always choosing carefully. They said things only those people should know, nicknames, old arguments, shared secrets whispered into the dark like bait. Terry cried openly, hands over his ears. Christian paced, muttering explanations that fell apart as soon as he spoke them. Matthew stood rigid, eyes locked on the tree line, jaw clenched so tight Evan thought it might crack. And Evan listened, because beneath the voices, beneath the footsteps, beneath the fear, there was something else. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Right at the edge of the firelight. When Christian's flashlight finally flickered back on, it caught it for less than a second. Tall. Too tall. Broad shoulders rising into a head that wasn't shaped right. Horns, maybe? Or branches? Eyes reflecting red like an animal caught in headlights. Then it stepped back. The fire popped. Sparks jumped. Darkness rushed in where it had been. No one spoke. They stayed that way for hours. The things circled them patiently, calling their names, sometimes whispering, sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking. It laughed again when Terry begged it to stop. Around 4 a.m, it went quiet. Not slowly. Instantly. The kind of silence that felt wrong. Evan didn't sleep. None of them did. When the sun finally broke through the trees, it felt like waking up from a nightmare that refused to let go. Birds chirped. The woods looked harmless. Normal. Christian laughed too loudly. Okay, that was messed up, but we're good now, right? Just messed with. No one answered him. They packed fast. No breakfast. No jokes. As they hiked out, Evan kept glancing behind them, expecting to see something following just beyond sight. He never did. By the time they reached the cars, relief washed over them in a dizzying wave. Terry leaned against the hood, laughing hysterically. Never camping again. Agreed. Ever. Gabe tried to rationalize it. Could have been people. Sick prank. Matthew didn't speak. The diner was bright, loud, smelled like grease and coffee. Normal. Evan sat across from Matthew, watching him stir sugar into his coffee. You okay? Evan asked. Matthew looked up and smiled. Yeah, he said. Why wouldn't I be? The smile was right. The voice was right. Something else wasn't. Evan's stomach twisted. Do you remember, Evan said carefully, the treehouse behind your old place? Matthew frowned. What treehouse? Evan's blood went cold. They'd spent entire summers in it. Matthew laughed it off. Dude, you're exhausted. Maybe. But when Matthew stood up to go to the bathroom, Evan noticed something that made his breath hitch. Matthew walked perfectly. Too perfectly. No limp, no stiffness, no soreness after a night like that. When he came back, Evan caught a glimpse of his reflection in the diner window. For half a second, Matthew's eyes didn't reflect the light. Evan pushed his plate away. Appetite gone. Something had followed them out of the woods, and it was sitting right across from him. Evan barely touched his food. Across the table, Matthew talked and laughed at the right moments, nodded when spoken to, reacted just a half-second slower than he should have. No one else noticed. Or maybe they didn't want to. Christian leaned back in his seat. I still think we scared ourselves. No sleep, creepy place, adrenaline, happens. Terry nodded quickly. Yeah, I mean, my brain filled in gaps, that's all. Gabe stirred his coffee, eyes tired. Let's not make this more than it is. Matthew looked at Evan. You're staring. Sorry. Matthew smiled again. That same perfect, practiced smile. Evan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. His focus was locked on the way Matthew held his fork. Too neat. Too deliberate. Like he'd learned how recently. Hey, Evan said suddenly. Remember senior year, when you broke your ankle? Matthew blinked. What? At the skate park, you tried that stupid stair jump. Matthew laughed. I've never skated in my life. The table went quiet. Christian frowned. Wait, you did break your ankle, didn't you?
Matthew's smile tightened. No, you're mixing me up with someone else. Evan's pulse roared in his ears. That's not possible, Evan said. I carried you to my car. Matthew leaned back, arms crossing. Evan, you're not okay. Gabe rubbed his temples. All right, enough. We're all fried. Evan stood so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Heads turned from nearby booths. That's not him, Evan said, voice low but shaking. That's not Matthew. Silence. Matthew's eyes never left Evan's face. Terry laughed nervously. Dude, stop. Christian stood halfway. Evan, sit down. You didn't hear what I heard, Evan said. Last night, we all heard things, Gabe snapped. That doesn't mean... He doesn't remember his dad's funeral, Evan said. He doesn't remember the tree house. He doesn't limp. He doesn't even blink the same. Matthew tilted his head. You're scaring them. That did it. The words were wrong, too calm, too knowing. Evan stepped back, heart hammering. Say my middle name. Matthew hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Christian noticed it too. Matt? Matthew smiled. You guys are unbelievable. Say it, Evan demanded. Matthew's eyes flicked around the diner, taking in exits, people, distance, calculating. Daniel, he said. Evan felt sick. That's not it, Evan whispered. Gabe slammed his hand on the table. Enough, we're done. Matthew stood. I'm leaving. Evan moved without thinking, blocking his path. You're not. For the first time, something cold flashed behind Matthew's eyes. Move, he said, quietly. The word carried weight, pressure. Evan's head rang. Gabe grabbed Evan's shoulder. Let him go. Evan shook his head violently. We have to go back. Terry stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Go back? To that place? There's someone still out there, the real Matthew. Silence fell heavy. Christian scoffed. You're saying that thing replaced him? Yes. Matthew laughed. A sound too sharp, too clean. That's insane, Terry said. Gabe hesitated, just long enough. If you're wrong, Gabe said slowly, you're accusing our friend of being a monster. Evan met his eyes. If I'm right, we left him to die. The words hung between them. Matthew folded his arms, waiting. Finally, Gabe exhaled. 2 hours. Christian blinked. What? I'll go with him. If we don't come back, you call the cops. Matthew smiled wider. I'll come too. Evan's blood ran cold. The drive back was silent. Matthew sat in the back seat, staring out the window, humming softly under his breath. Not a tune, just noise. Evan watched him through the mirror. Why are you so calm? Evan asked. Matthew looked at him. Should I be scared? Yes, Evan said. Matthew's smile faded. Interesting. They parked where the road ended. The woods waited. The moment Evan stepped past the tree line, pressure slammed into his chest, like the forest recognized him. Matthew walked ahead confidently, too confidently. Evan noticed the tracks first, deep impressions in the mud. Cloven. Gabe? Evan whispered. Gabe crouched beside him, face draining of color. Jesus. Matthew stopped walking. That's far enough, he said. Evan raised the fire poker. Where is he? Matthew sighed. You're persistent. The woods shifted. A cry echoed from below, a human scream cut short by pain. That's him, Evan said. That's Matthew. Matthew's shoulders rolled back. Bones cracked. Skin rippled. The disguise peeled away like wet paper. What stood before them was tall, 7 feet at least, fur matted and dark, legs bent wrong, hooves sinking into the soil. Curved horns framed a face that still remembered how to smile. Its mouth opened. Matthew's voice came out. Too late. The ground gave way beneath them. They fell into the ravine as the Goatman laughed. Evan hit the ground hard, the breath exploding out of his lungs as rocks and wet leaves scraped his arms. He rolled instinctively, barely avoiding a snapping branch as it crashed down where his head had been. Gabe landed beside him with a grunt, slamming shoulder first into the ravine wall. Pain flashed across his face, but he was already pushing himself up. Above them, something shifted. Heavy impact. Dirt rained down. The Goatman descended into the ravine with terrifying ease, hooves digging into stone, hands gripping roots and branches like it had done this 1,000 times before. Evan backed away, raising the fire poker. His arms shook violently. The creature landed with a dull thud several yards away. Up close, it was worse, taller, broader. Its face was a mockery of human structure, eyes too intelligent, mouth too flexible, teeth uneven like they'd been replaced more than once. It inhaled deeply. Matthew whimpered. "There you are," the Goatman said in Matthew's voice. "You're always so hard to find." Evan stepped forward, swinging the poker wildly. It connected with the creature's shoulder, a dull metallic thud echoing through the ravine. The creature barely reacted. It turned its head slowly, studying Evan with something like interest. "That hurts," it said, switching voices mid-sentence. Evan's mother's voice, calm, disappointed. Gabe grabbed a rock and hurled it, striking the creature's horn. The Goatman flinched, more surprised than injured.
That was enough. It moved. One moment it stood still, the next it was on Gabe. Too fast. A massive arm slammed into Gabe's chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him into the ravine wall. There was a sickening crack as bone met stone. Gabe screamed. Evan didn't think. He grabbed Matthew under the arms, ignoring Matthew's cries of pain, and dragged him backward through the brush. "Go," Gabe gasped. "Don't stop." Evan hesitated for half a second. The Goatman turned toward him, blood dripping from his mouth. That was the moment Evan knew. There was no saving everyone. "I'm sorry," Evan whispered. He pulled Matthew with everything he had, muscles screaming, vision tunneling. Branches tore at his skin, rocks bruised his knees. Matthew cried out with every jolt, teeth clenched, hands digging into Evan's arms. Behind them, Gabe screamed again. Then the sound cut off abruptly. The forest swallowed it. Evan didn't look back. They stumbled into a narrow creek bed, water slick beneath their feet. Evan half dragged, half carried Matthew, every step a gamble. His lungs burned, his legs shook. The Goatman followed. Not running, tracking. It stayed just far enough behind that Evan could hear it breathing, hear it occasionally call his name, trying different tones, different emotions. "Evan," it said softly, "you're tired." "Evan," it said again, sounding like Gabe, "you don't have to do this." Evan screamed, a raw, animal sound, and pushed harder. The creek curved sharply, opening onto a marked trail. Civilization. Evan collapsed onto the gravel path, dragging Matthew with him. He sobbed openly, chest heaving, vision blurring. The Goatman stopped at the tree line. It stared at them for a long moment. Then it smiled. "You'll forget," it said. "They always do." It turned and disappeared into the woods. Sirens wailed in the distance. A park ranger arrived minutes later, face pale as he took in the scene. He radioed for help, eyes flicking nervously to the forest. Evan tried to explain. Words tumbled out, broken and frantic. The ranger listened, nodded, didn't argue. But his eyes said everything. They didn't believe him. At the hospital, Evan sat shaking in a plastic chair while doctors rushed Matthew into surgery. Blood stained Evan's clothes. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. Police asked questions, the same ones over and over. What attacked you? Where is your friend? Are you sure? Hours later, an officer returned, face tight. "There's a problem," he said. Evan looked up. "Gabe, he's still out there." The officer hesitated. "Sir, Gabe has been at the diner since this morning." Evan laughed. It came out wrong, too loud, too sharp. "That's impossible," Evan said. "I left him in the ravine." The officer exchanged a look with his partner. "He never left him," he said. "He's been waiting." Evan's vision swam. Somewhere deep inside, something laughed.
Evan didn't remember standing up. One moment he was sitting in the hard plastic chair staring at the officer's mouth as the words landed, and the next he was on his feet, hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard his fingers went numb. "That's not possible," he said again, slower this time, like changing the speed might change the meaning. "I watched him get hit. I heard bones break." The officer didn't argue. He just nodded gently, the way people did when they'd already decided what category you belonged in. "We can take you back to him," the officer said, "if you want." Evan did want to, and he didn't. The walk back to the diner felt longer than the run through the woods. Every step made his stomach churn. His mind replayed Gabe's scream on a loop, cutting off at the exact same point every time. They pushed through the diner doors. The smell of grease hit him first. Coffee. Old oil. Normality. Norm sat in the same booth as before, stirring a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He looked up when Evan entered. "Hey," Gabe said. "There you are." Evan stopped breathing. Gabe looked fine. No blood, no broken bones, no torn clothes. Just tired. Concerned. Christian and Terry sat with him, both turning at the same time, relief flooding their faces. "Where the hell did you go?" Terry said, standing up. "You scared the hell out of us." Christian frowned. "The cops said you were hurt." Evan stared at Gabe. Gabe tilted his head slightly. "Evan?" Evan took a step forward, then another, heart hammering so violently it hurt. He stopped inches from Gabe's face. "Say it," Evan whispered. Gabe blinked. "Say what?" "Evan, what's wrong with you?" The officer cleared his throat. "Sir." Evan shook his head, his vision blurred, tears threatening. "No, not again." Gabe stood, placing a hand on Evan's shoulder. The touch was warm, solid. "Hey," Gabe said softly. "You're safe. We're all safe." Evan jerked away as if burned. "Don't touch me." Silence fell over the booth. Christian looked between them. "Okay, something happened out there. We need to talk about it." Evan laughed weakly. "You were there." Gabe frowned. "I never left." Evan's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to stay upright. They told him what they remembered. Gabe had stayed behind at the diner when Evan stormed out. Evan was ranting, shaking, saying things that didn't make sense. Matthew had gone to the bathroom and never come back. Evan had followed, yelling, and then disappeared. No ravine, no Goatman,
No screams. Matthew survived surgery. A broken leg, deep lacerations, shock. He told doctors he'd been attacked by an animal. He never mentioned voices, or mimicry, or replacements. When Evan visited him days later, Matthew looked away. "I don't want to talk about it. Please." Evan searched his face for something wrong. Found nothing. The months that followed were worse than the woods. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, Evan dreamed of voices calling his name from behind closed doors. He stopped camping, stopped hiking, stopped trusting his own memories. He replayed the diner scene over and over, looking for cracks. Sometimes, when he wasn't looking directly at Gabe, he thought he saw something shift, a reflection wrong in a window, a smile held too long. He never asked another question. They all agreed not to talk about it. Life moved on, except for Evan. 7 years later, sitting in his car with the radio off, Evan finally understood what had been bothering him since that day. The Goatman hadn't chased them into civilization. It hadn't needed to.
By leaving doubt behind. Evan stared into the tree line one last time before starting the engine. Somewhere deep in the woods, something laughed. Not out loud, but in memory. And if you've made it this far, listening to this story, Evan hopes you understand why he finally broke his silence. Because stories like this don't survive unless they're shared. If something ever feels wrong, if someone you know comes back different, trust that feeling. Talk about it. Don't ignore it. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, take a second to like this video so more people hear it. Subscribe if you want more true horror and unsettling encounters like this, and leave a comment if you've ever experienced something you still can't explain. Because the woods don't need everyone to believe. They only need a few people to forget.